In September 2015, the North Gauteng High Court sentenced Hewitt to 6 years in jail. He was convicted of rape and sexual assault of minors. His victims were girls he coached in the 1980s and 90s. The International Tennis Hall of Fame expelled him. September 23rd was the date set for his release on parole. However, the parole is being challenged by one of his victims. Her lawyer made a plea to the ministry to set it aside.
We all have constitutional rights. The rights of the victims should also be honoured and respected by the law. The victims were not informed. The law was not complied with. That is the one aspect of it. The other aspect is rape in South Africa have reached pandemic proportions. The rape of children should be condemned in the highest form.
The minister says it's important to afford the victims and their families an opportunity to participate in the offender's parole process. Until this happens, Hewitt will remain in jail. The 79-year-old has been in prison since 2016. Lerato Tipa, SABC News, Port Elizabeth.
Let's get more on the story. I'm now joined on the line by the spokesperson for the Ministry of Justice and Correctional Services, Chrispin Phiri. Thanks so much for your time on SABC News. Take us through the process of how an inmate is placed on parole.
Good evening, good evening to the viewers. So we have a parole board which is independent, and normally they would then consider persons who have served a certain period of their sentence. Normally it's about half. Then they would then take that decision to actually consider these offenders for parole, and in most instances they would also then be required to interact with the families who were victims per se of these offenders' acts, and then that would be considered and the person would then be granted parole. What we do know for sure in this case is that this did not happen, and that in and of itself is definitely grounds for review.
So my question would be, is there normally room for deviations from that process that you described when someone is looking for parole?
Not as we understand it, and especially not where sexual offences are concerned, because of the nature of the offence. It's quite important that the families or the victims themselves are engaged on these matters. And also, given the fact that the Department of Justice has actually made it quite clear that one of the things that we need to do in this administration is to ensure that our justice system has a victim-centric approach right across the justice spectrum. And this would be one way of ensuring that that's done. And right from the beginning, when the offender is in the facility, even through his rehabilitation process, the minister has made it quite clear that it's quite important to engage the families and the victims that the offender has caused harm to during even the rehabilitation process, not only to engage them, perhaps right at the end where we now want to grant parole, and you find that people have not heard about this offender for the past 10 years, and then you want to remind them when you're about to release him for parole that, remember, there's this guy or woman who has committed such an offense to you, they are considering granting them parole. So this goes to the core of implementing a victim-centric approach in the justice system.
So have you then found out what happened in this instance and why this was allowed to take place without the input of the victims?
That's precisely why we have a review board in place. It's almost like an appeal body where the minister can take a decision of a parole board on review, and that's something that would have to be brought to the fore to say, how was this decision taken by the independent parole board? What factors did they consider? And why was this crucial process not considered?
What does the Correctional Services Act say about what happens when proper processes are not followed to the perpetrator of these crimes?
This is the remedy that we have. Section 77 grants powers to the Correctional Service Parole Review Board in this respect, and the minister then can take it up on review.
Chrispin Phiri, the spokesperson for the Ministry of Justice and Correctional Services, joining us on the line there. Thanks so much for your time.